Gina Puzzuoli, and I practice psychiatry here in Charleston for 45 years, although I've gone back to work part-time right now. I love art and have kind of put my money where my mouth is, and I enjoy it. You know, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and my mother had very severe rheumatoid arthritis. And we were fairly poor. We were very poor, actually. And so here's my dad with this wife who can't get out of bed and no money and this little girl. So at that time, I don't know if it's still true or not, but at that time, all the museums in Cleveland were free. The Cleveland Museum of Art, the Natural History Museum, there was a costume museum. And so lots of times on the weekends, we would go to museums and look at stuff. And I can't remember at what point, but at some point I got a lot more interested in the tags than I did in the art. And I kept reading from the collection of or donated by. And I asked my dad about that and said, what does this mean? And basically he said, well, somebody bought this and they decided to give it to the museum. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me because I thought, well, if you had this, why would you just give it away? You could have it and keep it and look at it. And he said, well, think of it this way. If they hadn't done that, you would not be looking at it. I thought, well, it made sense. It made sense. And that started me thinking about having art. And the museums and the art were kind of an escape. They were kind of an escape. We were poor. Things weren't great. And this was like a little safe haven. It was calm. It was pleasant. It was pleasing. It was fun to look at. And my dad was kind of my dad ultimately got a PhD in chemistry, but he had a science background, he was very good at math. But he had an appreciation for art. And he didn't know how to talk to kids, so he talked to me like I would be talking to you. And so we talked about the art. And that was kind of something that just stuck in my head over the years. Went to college. I was a chemistry major with the idea that I wanted to go to medical school. And as a freshman going into, you're trying to pick a major and you got an advisor and all of that. And I was told several times, well, what you should do is you should go into nursing or you should go into med tech. And that way, if you don't get into medical school, and I think what they meant was when you don't get into medical school, you'll have something to fall back on. That didn't make any sense to me, so I just went ahead and was a chemistry major and applied to medical school. When I went to medical school, there are 4 classes, 4 years of medical school, 76 people in each class. And at that time, all the classes put together, there were 5 women. We were not welcome. I think that's a sort of a euphemism. They really didn't want us. And the standard phrase was, well, you're just going to get married and have babies and drop out of medicine and you're taking the place of a man. And there was no hidden agenda. This was said like a lot. And I never thought of myself as a feminist, but with that kind of attitude, education was always very important. Education was valued in my home. Education was revered. You respected your teachers. They were kind of on a plane above. And for teachers to say that, I found pretty appalling. And decided maybe I was a feminist. And you just start thinking about women and women's everything, women's course in history, women's course in science, women's course in art. When I was 13, my dad bought me the book Lone Woman, which was the story of Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, who was the first licensed female doctor in the United States. And, you just start thinking maybe women are kind of where it's at. And so the first three pieces of, I didn't set out to get women, but I bought my first three pieces over a course of a couple of years, and I realized they were all women. And I realized three pieces made a collection. And it went from there.
Gina has been an incredible supporter to the arts, to her women's collection here, which is nationally important. But she helps everybody. She's helped me. She'll help established artists to famous artists to struggling students. When I was teaching, if a student I saw needed something, I'd tell Gina and she'd get it for them, whether it was more supplies or buy something so they could, get their car fixed or something. So she's a great supporter of that.
Until I went to work at the VA, the bulk of my practice was women. For a while, I was probably one of only 2 or 3 female psychiatrists in West Virginia. So when I was in private practice, I saw a lot of adolescent girls, and I saw a lot of women because I was it. And therefore, without meaning to, women's stories kind of became part of my fiber. So when I buy a piece of art, it's very rare that I just see a piece and like it so much I buy it. I'm a reader, and usually I read about these artists, and something about their story touches me, and then I go in pursuit. I have an Elaine de Kooning, and of course she was married to Willem de Kooning. I have a Dorothy Denner who is married to David Smith. I have a couple of Esfir Slobodkina, and she was married to Ilya Bolotowski. It's and they basically supported their male spouses, partners, counterparts, illustrating books, teaching art, giving art lessons. One of my very, very, very favorite artists is Edith Dimmitt, and her work there's not much of her work out there. She supported him, but when he died, his death preceded her, and she burned all her work. So the only thing that exists is stuff that she was not in possession of. And of course, she hadn't sold very much, so it was the bulk of her work. Kay Sage and Yves Tanguy, after he died, in fact, those 2 pieces up there, apocryphally, were the last pieces she did before she committed suicide in mourning for his death. How you approach your art, your craft, your creating. So I think part of what I love about old things is that the hand of the person who has this story. Like sometimes I want to know who made it, and I want to know the first person who had it, and I want to know, I tell people these old tables, look at them. People had dinner over them. People cried over them. People yelled at each other over them. People laughed over them. Families grieved over them. It's about the story, as it is in art. What was going on when Leslie Dill made that woman with words coming out of her mouth? I don't know, but it made something amazing. Oh, we don't have that kind of time. Let me go get my soapbox, and I want to stand on it. It disgusts me. It just disgusts me. It disgusts me. That's just it. First of all, people have no concept of what it took for a human being. What happened to that human being that made that fiberboard table that you bought at the box store? What kind of lives do those people live? What kind of lives do those children live? What's that piece going to be like in 5 years? You're not going to be able to sell it at a yard sale. It's crap. It's ugly. I think it's the worst of humans. People suffer for it. Not that there wasn't suffering going on, craftsmen 200, 100 years ago, but this is on a scale that we haven't ever seen before. Mass consuming clothes and rugs and crap art, it's disgusting. And I think it's painful to the human soul, and I don't think people realize it, because I do believe that objects absorb our energy. And the mistreatment of those people making those things in horrible factory conditions in China, I know those disgusting objects have absorbed that pain. And I think it kind of is emitted to the people who live with it, especially when there's a lot of it. Maybe crazy, it's just how I see it. Well, this is going to seem like an offhanded answer, and it's not. Old stuff, like really old stuff, like stuff that has existed for hundreds of years. And as I say, I feel that these things absorb the lives of people, the stories of people, and it's an honor to be able to share those. We're just, I say it a lot, we're just stewards. You don't own this table. You get to take care of it for a while. You get to live with it for a while. You get to touch it. You get to kind of absorb it. Then it moves on. Hopefully, if you're a good steward, it moves on. I like things. I like Renaissance period things. I like pre-Columbian. The older the better. Probably more than I deserve. I've been incredibly lucky that I have been allowed to touch these things. And there have been, I have no idea, but a lot. And I think that part of whatever goodness there is in me, and sometimes there's not a lot of goodness in me, but part of the goodness that I have is that my soul has been able to absorb some of those things. I think art form is the best of human beings. And I think it's an honor to get to live with it and just see it. Just go to museums or go to galleries or go to houses and see it. I think it allows us to participate in the life of that sacred object. And I think they are sacred, because I think it's the sacred in people that allows them to make these objects. First of all, I think there are some amazing people making art in West Virginia. I think there are older artists that have persevered, and I think there are younger artists who have not allowed themselves to be discouraged. I think that I think West Virginia, I think historically has always been a supporter of arts. You know, whose grandfather whittled and whose mama did tatting and needlework. I think historically the arts in West Virginia has thrived. Maybe not like you think of it in Chicago, but I think we have nurtured and honored artists here, and I think that the current political state of demeaning art and belittling it and devaluing it is disgusting. Um, and and yet again, I see people persevering, and I think that is absolutely amazing. Um, I see art that I think, if this were even in Cleveland, if this were in Pittsburgh, man, folks would be knocking down the door. Those are two separate questions. Cookie is a miserable human being. She is one of the main reasons, she's one of the main examples, let me say this. I'm not a fan of rich people. I think that they are self-aggrandizing, self-serving, and probably don't have a lot of humanity in them. And that's how Cookie is. She's not a nice person. She's very wealthy. She lets you know very quickly that that's important. But she does have two redeeming qualities, and which is why I put up with the other stuff. She loves animals, and she's very, surprisingly enough, ecologically minded. And so her work does embody those two redeeming, possibly only two redeeming qualities that she has. Her work is all found objects, trash. It's all trash. She did a show at Taylor Books several years ago, filled up the whole gallery, and I think she spent $43. It was all stuff nobody wanted. She's very big on recycling and being mindful that the footprints we're making are going to affect generation after generation after generation. And she gives all of her proceeds to the Boone Animal Rescue Coalition. So, yeah, I tolerate her. She's a horrible person, she's a horrible person. She's, self-serving, and she doesn't understand that there are other human beings in the world that might have something worth considering. But, I put up with it because we raise money for Bark, and it possibly, hopefully, makes people think about, before they throw something away, maybe there's something else they could do with it. So I tolerate her, but on a personal level, no, we have almost nothing in common.